Athletes, take your mark. Get set. It's time for the Addict to Athlete podcast. Everybody out there, Coach Blue Robinson here. Hey, I want to thank you all so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. Greatly appreciate you doing so. As always, lean on to that website, addicttoathlete.org. You'll find all of our backlog content, information about the team, how to become a recovery coach to open a nonprofit chapter of Team Addict to Athlete in your community, and help spread the word that addiction is achievable through the pursuits of sobriety when you have a team around you to eliminate all that negative stuff and to get a little bit of distance behind you simply by leaning into your recovery. Athletes, I want to thank you all so much for all that you do for our Project ELF. This is Addict to Athletes charity season, and so it's so good to see everybody coming out and helping support Project ELF to bring Christmas to low-income families and individuals who might have struggled with addiction or legal issues, or maybe just have fallen on hard times. I want to thank you all so much for all the charity that you're giving, and I hope that you'll feel that Christmas spirit come the 25th when you feel the magnitude of what you guys have been producing. Athletes, got a great guest today that I'm excited to talk to. She is a very inspirational individual that has overcome some pretty amazing adversities to become, I would say, an amazing athlete in her own right. This is Helen Hansen-Smith. I want to thank you for carving out some time for us. Why don't you introduce yourself to Team Addict to Athlete? Give us a little bit about you, what makes you, and let's talk about this transition, literally from what we discussed before we hit record on moving from addict to athlete. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I am excited to be here. My name is Helen Hansen-Smith. It is a double first name. So if you're familiar with any Southerners, a lot of us do have two first names.
Nice.
So, but a lot of people call me HH. And I have grown up in Lower Alabama. We call it the other LA over here.
Nice.
We just have a little bit of a twang in our accent. But I grew up here and started running when I was in college. I had been a dancer my whole life, ballet primarily, then got to college and kind of stopped movement and, put on the freshman 20. And I had a sorority sister that was like, oh, I go jogging. And I was like, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
I was like, well, why not try it? So I went out one day, I ran a mile, and it probably took me 25 minutes. And,
Nice.
But I did it. And I just slowly built from there and fell in love with the sport. And that carried me through college. Yeah.
I love it.
It really, and that was kind of what began the story of you got to do something hard. And then it slowly, you fall in love with it. Like things that you want don't come easy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really just kind of building up, and ran my first half marathon in college. But towards the end of my time, I went to Ole Miss. My senior year, I really started drinking pretty heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of thought at that time, I'm in my 20s, this is normal. I'm just living my best life. And I had several people make some comments that were of concern and out of love. But, I didn't want to hear that. And so I made it through college. I don't know how, graduated, came home and was really in a dark place. My family didn't know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with me. And they sent me to a rehab program in Arizona. And then that didn't work out great. Came home and then did 2 rounds of a 90-day program here locally, as well as inpatient. So definitely went through some rehab. But December 20th, 2019 is when I woke up and I just said, I'm tired. And now I'm almost 5 years sober. So here we are.
Incredible. That is incredible. You unpacked a lot in that little introduction, HH. I love it. I think that is phenomenal. I do want to start just briefly though about that college experience. I just had my daughter on the podcast. She's been in the podcast studio quite a bit because she's a little too wise for her age. She just started college in Southern Utah. It was interesting how she was trying to explain to me like the college life, and she grew up with 2 therapists as parents, right? I've been clean and sober now since 1996. So that seems like a millennia ago. But, and her understanding of the drinking scene and all that kind of stuff. Utah's a very conservative state. And so it's not really the forefront, but that want, that desire, that need for that college experience is very much that. And so it does happen. I'm curious specifically with the drinking and whatnot that happens, just to, because it's independence, it's a rite of passage, these kind of things. How fast did that start getting out of control for you? We started kind of leaning on more of the social rather than the reasons you're there in the first place. Because there's a lot that goes into that. I don't know if we prepare our youth for the wall that they're going to inevitably hit, right? Tell me a little bit about, like, at first, was it just like, yeah, fun and casual, and then you felt like it got problematic, and to the people around you, they're like, hey, red flags here, but you're like, what are you talking about? Because I didn't realize, even with her growing up the way she grew up, like that was still kind of a problem just around. Like, it's acceptable, it's a rite of passage, but it's also like could get very problematic very quickly. What are your thoughts on that with this generation trying to get into the college experience without the pitfalls and the dangers and the warning signs?
I'm very thankful and excited for this generation that is entering school and the college experience or just life experience and what that comes with socializing and where alcohol is and isn't offered. I feel like addiction is being talked about more.
Yeah.
So I feel like there is more heaviness brought around it. And I mean, I follow girls on social media that are in college and they're more focused on health and doing better things. When I was there, I felt like, but that could also be who I surrounded myself with.
Right.
But I'm excited for this generation because I feel like it is talked about more, as opposed to when I was there, which wasn't almost 10 years ago, but it happened so quickly. I had got my degree in hospitality management. And so I worked on the square in Oxford at several restaurants for internship hours and just for experience. And then that kind of drawed me into it because, it was the bar scene. I would get off work. I knew people at other restaurants and it just kind of escalated from there. And I'm an all or nothing person.
Yeah.
So when I picked up a drink, it would be gone in minutes. It just slowly built on from there. And then once I start something, I can't stop.
Yep.
It was scary for me because of how quickly it happened, but I feel like it can be a slippery slope for anybody in their journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And the next thing that you mentioned that I think is super important were the people that kind of started to, I call it, test the waters and are willing to do what I call like sacrificing a relationship. Like, I'm going to bring something up and it could really, piss you off, or it could really make you kind of see things for what we see because we care about you. When you mention these people that said these things that maybe had pointed some stuff out, it's never easy to hear, especially from people that you love, that you care about, that you might be doing something that's harmful. So I'm curious kind of like how you reacted to that and how much they must have loved you to be able to like raise that flag. Does that make sense? Because that is such a sensitive thing for family, for friends to be like, hey, have you noticed? Like, tell me a little bit about the people that you trusted enough, even if it was hard to hear, to let that message in.
Yeah, that's a hard one because when I first was hearing those words, that's when it was kind of began to get scary, is because at the time I felt like I had some control. So somebody would say something and I would say, well, I don't want to hear something negative about myself because I grew up very much a people pleaser, perfectionist. So then I would try and take it to the other degree and try to prove like, oh no, I'm able to handle this. And then quickly I would maybe not drink for a few days and then immediately fall back into it when I go out on a Friday night or something would happen and just continue to burn those bridges. And I lost a lot of friendships in college. And I've had to really work on that restoration in a lot of my relationships because I did not take those voices as seriously as I should have. But that was part of my journey and part of what I had to learn.
Yeah. And you know what? I love that because I had a friend that did that same thing to me. And I was so like righteously like mad at him. Like, how dare you point out this flaw? But he was absolutely right. And later, it wasn't like immediately, but several years later, I had to pull him aside. And as our friendship had deteriorated and detached, because I was going to same thing. I'm going to show you that I'm not this person, but I was, and say, you know what, man, thank you so much for being willing to sacrifice that relationship with me, because if you hadn't have said that, the person that knew me the most was my best friend. If you hadn't have said that, I would have continued to really just nonchalantly go about life as a liar, as a manipulator, as an emotional thief, so to speak. And I've never really thought about how hard it is for those people, because when I say sacrificing a relationship, they don't know how it's going to go.
No.
But I'm so happy that was maybe like the spark that, even though it didn't sit well at the time, kind of lit the fuse to inevitably get to where you're going. You got to a point where you went to rehab. I mean, you left somewhere to go somewhere. And rehab is interesting. I've been involved in that world for a while before we got really deep into Addict to Athletes nonprofit. It's a rough one because it's taking you out of your out of your, your familiarity zones, and it's putting you into a situation where you're like, what is this? You're telling me what to do. I can't do this. I can't do that. And sometimes, like you said, it doesn't work right away because we have to be ready. But they're all necessary steps, I think, for where we're going. But tell me a little bit about your experience with the rehab, because it's hard. Sometimes you're not prepared for it. Usually it's an external reason that gets us there. What was your experience navigating that new world of like, this whole business is designed to tell me I can't do something? Like, how was your mindset with this?
That's the hard mind shift you have to make when you choose recovery. Is you're told I can't do something, and I'm a person that I don't want any limits put on me.
Yeah.
I don't want any limits. And I mean, I put that even in my running, I have to be careful with like my training and everything. I'm like, well, I can do that. It's like, well, no, we got to build there. But when you're told in that time, you're like, you can't do that. And I was in my early 20s when that's what everybody was doing. I'm like, wait, what do you mean I can't go hang out with my friends and have a drink, or, have a glass of wine with a girlfriend, or just something like that? And it was going to rehab I went to a program out in Arizona. My family called a 1-800 number. They put me on a flight.
Wow.
And yeah, it was pretty, I was there for, I think, 45 days. And I didn't tell anybody. I mean, I didn't have my phone or anything, they take that all away.
Yeah.
And it was a good kind of introduction to kind of like that therapy I needed. But the program, we really just like sat on a couch all day and kind of talked about our feelings. And I am a person that, that's great and all, but I need to learn how to live with sobriety.
Thank you.
it was a good program. Like the talk therapy was great, but we were at this beautiful home in Arizona. I mean, it felt like a celebrity rehab kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
It wasn't what I needed. And so I came home, immediately relapsed a couple weeks later, got in a terrible car accident I should not have walked away from.
Wow.
And, just a lot happened, and went about another year. And then my family found a program locally to us called Home of Grace for Women. And it's a nonprofit. They don't have a detox facility. They're non-medical. So you have to go through detox before you can go. But it's a 90-day program, and they don't have mansions or anything. I mean, it's small dormitory style rooms with women.
Love it.
And they're coming from Mobile Metro or coming out of situations where they're being court ordered there. It was an environment I was not prepared for.
Yeah.
But we had chores. We had stuff to do. Like, they taught me how to be responsible and be sober, because that is a huge part of your recovery. So that's just my 2 cents on the whole rehab thing.
I love it. No, I love it. And you're right. And I think sometimes some of those programs get in their way when they try to make it too appealing. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be a good program, but sometimes the emphasis isn't on the change. It's the hoping and convincing that you'll do it. When you get into a situation where you see the reality of it, like you've got people there that are on your same level, that are all working towards the same goal. You've got responsibilities and duties and abilities to inspire the woman sitting next to you. I mean, that's where I think the real stuff takes hold. And you're right. As a therapist myself, getting clean in 1996, getting back into school as an adult, trying to figure out like, oh, I shouldn't have dropped out in high school. Maybe I should have finished this. And going through the steps, I started to realize that my whole concept of recovery was based off of, I can't sit still in a group or in a chair. I have to move. The very first time I realized this is when I got clean. I had to walk away from all my friends. I committed what I call like social suicide, right? You walk away from everything. And I had all this money because I was working. I had to go I went and bought a mountain bike. So I'm like, I got to spend this cash or else it's going somewhere it shouldn't. And just one day after hanging out with my friends on TV, Monica and Chandler and Ross and Phoebe, because all my other friends were gone, I'm watching friends on TV. I went on this mountain bike ride. And I was in the middle of nowhere, Utah mountains, and these other 2 mountain bikers pull up and they're like, dude, are you lost? I'm like, in a lot of different ways. Yes, I am. And they're like, follow us down. So I followed them down on this trail. They sent me to the trailhead so I didn't die up there in the mountains. And they told me, look, we come up here a couple times a week. We'd love to show you around up here, but do me a favor, get a helmet, because I didn't have a helmet. Like, get a water bottle so you don't die of dehydration. And he's like, meet us up here. I did that. I went and got the stuff. I became a mountain biker. And it was literally moving from addict to athlete. I was no longer Blue the addict. I was Blue now the mountain biker. I thought there's something different. These guys didn't care what I had, what I was using. They saw a mountain biker like, this guy's a mountain biker. Let's treat him like one. That same concept, when you're not treated like an addict, but you're treated like a person who needs to heal. It's a huge thing, isn't it? And so I'm curious when you integrated your running back into this, because I'm going to share with you a little bit when we get into your story about what Addict to Athlete does. And I know it's working for you. I can tell it by your energy that you're putting off here. Tell me a little bit about when you laced your shoes back up and you looked down that road in front of you and you started to run again, what you felt and why you decided it was time to move instead of just sit. Does that make sense?
Yes. So running always, it started in college, and then it became when I was in Arizona, actually. We were in this house, and I'll never forget it. It was like a big backyard, and we weren't allowed to leave the premises. But I borrowed, because I couldn't have a fitness tracker or anything on me, I borrowed my house sitter. She had a Fitbit, like a basic Fitbit. And I said, can I borrow that? And I was able to figure out how many times I could run around this backyard, and it would be a mile. And I mean, I know that sounds very kind of silly, but I figured out I could do 4 loops around this backyard. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional talking about it. But
yeah.
And so I gave her tracker back. So every night I would do 8 loops, and I would just do 2 miles. And that's when I knew movement was going to have to be a part of my recovery. So that's when it started. And then I would kind of be in and out of running while still drinking. And then when I finally decided to really go all in sobriety in December of 2020 or 2019, excuse me, January came, and then March, and then it was COVID. And so all the gyms shut down. At the time, I was just running on the treadmill, and I was just going to the treadmill, running 2 or 3 miles at a time. And then when the gym shut down, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then that's when I started running outside again.
Wow.
And it was almost like I felt like a kid again. So that's kind of how it all started.
I love this. Listeners, I want you to pay particular attention to what she's telling you. I love the fact that you did 4 loops, and they're on the backyard, like 1 mile, 8 loops. Yeah. And that was your world, because realistically, that was all you had. But yet you made do with it. And I love that. I have a program of Addict to Athlete in the Utah State Prison, and they invited me once to come run their first official 5K. And I'm like, wow, the state of Utah must have built them an amazing collegiate track, right? Oh no, these guys just ran the perimeter inside their fence, and it was like 38 loops around to do a 5K. And I remember how proud they were, but that was all they had. But you felt the same result. It was a little bit of freedom. First of all, amazing staff for giving you the Fitbit, because that's breaking the rule, right? But
I just wanted to have a metric of some sort to track.
Yes, absolutely. And look what it did. But I also love the fact that when you went home, you kept yourself captive by staying on the treadmill, right? I mean, and it makes sense, because that's all you knew. Like, I've got to stay put. That freedom of getting outside, that is amazing, because then you're like, wait a minute. And I look at this in one way. And I want your thoughts on this. In recovery, in addiction, we kind of look for security. We look for security in the substance. We look for security in the relationships, in jobs, in finance. We want security. We want job security, financial security. We want all this security. But what happens when we reach maximum security? That sounds a lot like prison to me, right? I want maximum security. Well, we can put you in a little cell and have all your needs met, but that's all you're getting. But freedom, job freedom, recovery freedom, financial freedom, that's a scary word for someone in recovery, because there's so many options. It means we've got to make healthy choices. So when you made the leap from backyard to treadmill to outside, did you realize how important your freedom really meant to you? You're like, wait a minute, I have a choice. I'm free to choose. I can turn here. I can go straight. I can go over that bridge. I can go wherever I want. And how that plays into your recovery. Like, I can choose not to drink. I don't have to tell people I can't drink. I'm going to tell people I'm choosing not to drink. It's a huge power move, isn't it? What are your thoughts on that?
That's what I really tell people, is when I realized that shift, because those first few months, it's every day, every hour, every second. And I remember I would have to go to like a work event. And at the time I was dating my now husband, and he really helped me in those first few months. And awesome. I remember going to a work event, and they gave us drink tickets. They gave us 2 drink tickets, and you could get a beer or wine. And I remember coming back from that event, and I still had my 2 tickets. And I was like, I did it. Yes. But what I want people to know is that I have more freedom now than when I was in addiction. Because when I was in addiction, I only had one choice, and it was what I was going to drink that day. But now I have every choice possible. Like I've been able to do things I never thought possible. And that is what I want other people to know and see in my experience, strength, and hope, is that there is so much freedom in recovery when you say no to something that you never thought you could say no to.
I love it. You're absolutely right. It's a powerful word. And like you said, people like me and people like you who grow up in situations that we do that tend to be people pleasers have a really hard time using that word because we want to help everyone. And we usually put ourselves way down on the totem pole, right? We like our priority list, we're on the bottom. So I think you're absolutely spot on with that. I think also that mindset of like what it's doing for you. When you make those healthy choices because you have that freedom, it makes the next decision that much easier. So I'm curious. One thing I noticed when I first started Addict to Athlete in 2011 was that I would simply ask the whole concept was I bumped into some of my clients when I was working at a government program here locally that required my clients to attend 3 outside 12-step meetings. And one day I come walking out for lunch and I see them all huddled around the back of a little pickup truck. And I'm like, they're up to no good. So I snuck over there and I gave them what are you guys doing? Scared them to death. Can you believe that they were having each other like forge their sign-off sheets saying they were attended? And I'm like, how dare you, right? And I'm like, what are you guys doing? I'm like, this is addict behavior. And they're like, Blue, it's not working for us, man. Like we come to treatment 5 times a week. We go to our probation officers. We go to our drug court counselors. We go see our probation officers, our judges. And then we got to go to 3 meetings out there. Like, for me, the 12 steps aren't working. And that's all we had out here. And I got thinking, you're kind of right. Like, that is kind of dumb that we make you do this when it's your free time, but you only have this one choice, right? Go back to the choice factor. And I knew that in my own recovery, running, mountain biking, it's what saved me. So I thought, maybe I should try this. So I just had a little brain epiphany and decided to go tell my bosses that I want to train them for a little 5K, a little couch to 5K. And by the grace of Almighty, they gave me the green light. I went down to my group of 30 plus people. Only 5 of them said, yeah, I'll give your little 5K a chance, whatever that is. And as I was training them to run this 5K, we'd have them come an hour before group. We'd stretch, we'd go run the couch to 5K. You know, the couch to 5K gradually increases them to boost their stamina. And the day the race came, it was amazing. They did phenomenal. And it blew me away of the change. And I didn't realize this until we were running once. And all of a sudden, this athlete of mine, this client of mine, who is like a brick wall in the therapy office with my feng shui lighting and desk set up and, like everything they tell you in graduate school to make a safe environment. But we're out here in the public and they're like saying, Blue, I'm having these thoughts about when I was a kid and the thought I was talking to my dad that we're doing therapy while we're running. And I'm like, why are you guys feeling more comfortable out here than in my office? And what I started to understand is there's something to this. There's something about movement and something about the way that people process emotion. And here I'm thinking I'm breaking new ground and getting ready to do all these journal studies. And it's just EMDR therapy. And when I realized it was just EMDR therapy, I got trained in EMDR and I use it now instead of just sitting on my couch, moving my hand across their faces. They're looking, left and right to stimulate EMDR. It's such a natural thing that we all do that it just comes so quick. Tell me a little bit about what you processed, what you left behind, because I'm a firm believer that when you move, you heal. It's amazing. I don't think people realize how powerful this is, but I'm curious. Just like talking about your loops in the backyard where you caught that emotion, what else have you left behind that you're like, I don't need to carry this anymore, simply because you decided to move and not stay put? Because we've all hit the walls when we're out there doing our races and only we can get through, over or around them. So tell me a little bit about the emotions that you've kind of experienced through your running. It's a big question.
Probably all of them. But
yeah.
The biggest one for me, I think, is just a female and a people pleaser, is I grew up and anger wasn't really an emotion that was allowed. Or it was, but you had to express it in the way that people wanted you to.
Right.
And so I feel like I've allowed myself to learn how to express those emotions that I never knew I could express because I thought they weren't allowed. So if something upset me or something didn't go my way, that's when I would turn to drinking because I can control it this way, or really I lost all control that way. But now I'm able to recognize those emotions and react to them in the appropriate manner. And so movement helps so much with that, because something might happen and I get frustrated, where I used to turn to drinking or something else just to quash that feeling, I can be like, I'm going to go for a quick run. And I come back and the sense of clarity is just remarkable. And so that is just a huge part of why movement is huge for me in my recovery.
Well, it's true. And listeners, the principles that she's telling you, they're not hard to obtain if you're willing to put in the work to do it. If you're willing to get just even a little motivation, you don't have to go out and run a marathon. You can get out and walk around your block. Like, it doesn't take much for the benefits of, eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing, EMDR, to start working. And so literally, I know you've done this because I've done this, and the athletes I coach do this. You have something heavy on your heart, on your mind. You go out for that run. By the time you get back, you've got solutions, or you've got ideas. You've got more choices. You've done that, right? You feel it.
Oh yeah. That's the big thing is, I mean, even my husband now, he's so funny. Like, something will happen and he could tell I've gotten worked up and he'll say, why don't you go for a run?
I love it. He's the coolest. Yeah.
He like even realizes how helpful that is for me to get my thoughts in order, get that priority list kind of built in my head and then also see what is serious and what's not, because I'm bad about getting into my head about stuff. And so running helps immensely with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I want to touch base on too, because again, you are letting a lot of people into your world. And this is another thing that you mentioned with the young ones getting into college and whatnot and being okay talking about this. I mean, when I first started Addict to Athlete in 2011, it was appalling for people to really understand that I didn't want to keep them hidden. I wanted people to be proud of who they are. I was no longer in the team of anonymity. I'm like, no, in this day and age, anonymity will kill you. We've got to figure out how to spread these stories. And so you're very open about this. And so as I was navigating through your socials to kind of support and to kind of see what you've been up to, I did see that you got married. Tell me a little bit about that relationship, because he knows all the good about you and obviously all the bad about you. And he says, I'm in. I love that, because my wife did that same thing to me. She's like, you're a nerd. You're kind of a crazy guy, but I love you. We're all in. For people like us, isn't that interesting to have someone see us for the good and the bad, the flaws and the beauty, and be like, I'm choosing in? What was that like for you to have someone see you for who you were and who you are?
He and we met through work, and I very much fell into a pattern. What kind of became my modus operandum, if you will, when I was drinking was dating apps and quickly getting that message of, hey, let's go get a drink. Because that's the first thing people say is like, hey, why don't we go get a drink? And I really burned a lot of bridges and had a lot of negative relationships because of that. And we met at a work event and followed each other on social media. And he messaged me and he said, do you want to go get ice cream? And that was like the first anytime anybody had ever asked me for something. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I do. And at this time, I still was drinking. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what yet. And we went and we got ice cream and we started our relationship. And he did see me several times drunk. Mm-hmm. And he himself does not drink. It gives him headaches. He just gets real red and allergic from it. So he's just not a drinker, but he's never had an issue with it like me. So that process on December 19th, all out and really messed up. And he saw that. And the next morning I woke up on December 20th and he was by my side and he said, this isn't working. And I was like, no, it's not. You really don't want to be with me. I get it. Like, this is too much. And he goes, no, I want to be with you. I know you can do this, but this drinking thing is not working for you.
Wow.
And I don't know why, but I was like, you're right. Like, people had said that to me so many times, but not in that way, I guess.
Exactly.
And he said that. And ever since then, I was like, you know what? Okay. And he went to a couple meetings with me. And then from there, we made it work, and it became 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. And then on my 1 year anniversary, I opened up on social media that I was sober. And that's when I knew I could not be anonymous.
Yep.
And so he helped me with that transition as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And you're right. Something landed differently. I mean, I love the fact that you're like, yeah, you're probably right. You want me to help you pack? And he's like, no, you nerd. That's not what I'm talking about. I love that, because that's when he's like, I know all the good and all the bad, and I'm choosing in. And for some reason, you felt that too. And I love that. That is amazing, because we need people like that. We need to be able to trust the people that we bring in, to be able to speak freely like that, because look what it did. That means you're coming up on You're coming up on 5 years then here in a week or so. That's amazing.
December 20th. I know.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy how quickly
what's on your horizon? What are you doing? Because that's a huge milestone.
So I set a goal. It was kind of like a gray area goal. I wanted to run a marathon before I was 5 years sober.
Mm-hmm.
And I accomplished that in October. I ran the Chicago Marathon. And so that was my first full marathon. And after that, I can say I only want to run hundreds more. I loved it.
Nice.
So it was very rewarding. But for my actual day of, we're going to be traveling, but I plan on definitely squeezing in a 5-mile run. I think that'll be fair to celebrate that way.
That's a good accomplishment. I highly recommend you doing that. That is amazing. So that leads me to my next question too, because when I started Addict to Athlete, a lot of people that didn't understand the principles or concept were pretty much saying, well, all you're doing is going to be switching addictions with them. You're going to switch them from using, heroin to, being gym rats. And I'm like, then you have no idea what addiction really is, because I'd much rather have someone go to the gym than go out to score heroin. Beyond that, tell me a little bit about your increase, because if you can do a 5K, you can do a 10. If you can do a 10, you can do a half and full. But it's not like an addiction. It's more of a I know I can do this, and it's helping me get to a lot of other goals. Tell me a little bit about this bucket list that you've accumulated, and maybe what has been one of your most profound or emotionally kind of invigorating races or events you've done, because we all have that one where we've had to overcome some adversity that by the time we hit the finish line, we're like, holy cow, I did that.
Yes. So kind of the build up to running for me, it was those first few years, it was just running just for my recovery. And I mean, I wasn't doing any races or anything. I was just a runner.
Yeah.
And I wasn't signing up for races or anything. And then I transitioned in my job to a position where I work from home, and I had Saturdays freed up again. And that's when I woke up one day. I was like, I'm going to go run a 5K.
Nice.
That's when I started kind of racing. And I realized how much I missed that, just a feeling of accomplishment when you cross the finish line, because running feels great. I love running. I would run even if races didn't exist. But having that, I'm a person where I love words of affirmation. I love knowing I did something that I should be proud of. And so when I started training for the marathon, and I'd done half marathons and loved those. They were great. But I knew I was like, I need to do something that is really hard. But the whole time I trained for it, I mean, it was hard. It takes up so much time. And I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to cross that finish line healthy and strong and not miserable if I could.
Yeah.
And I just remember waking up on Saturdays, and I live in Lower Alabama where humidity is 1,000%. And I was waking up at 4 a.m. on Saturdays to do my long runs because it is so hot. It's dangerous. I can't run at 10 in the morning. So I just remember waking up for those runs so excited and knowing it was going to be hard. But I just kept telling myself I've done harder things, because the hardest thing I ever did was get sober. So if this marathon's hard, okay, but I've done harder things. And that's really what I kept telling myself.
You are so right. And I love that. In fact, it is kind of funny how you're waking up at 3 a.m. to go running instead of going to bed at 3 a.m. because you've been all night partying, right? You're like, wow, what am I doing? But I love that concept of I've done harder things. One of the early days of Addict to Athlete, I tell this story frequently, but I think it comes up for a reason. And I had a girl, her name was Janice, and she was running, and she was one of my clients in therapy, but she was also wanted to join the team. And so one day we're running, and we're about a mile into the run, and she's like, Coach, I need to stop. And I'm like, I kind of was noticing that she was keeping pace with me. And so I'm like, well, Janice, let's run to that stop sign at the end of the block. Then she's like, okay. So we run to the stop sign, and I'm looking at her. So she hasn't slowed down yet. So I'm like, how about we run to the middle of the next block to that red pickup? And she's like, oh, okay. So we get to the next, pickup truck, and I'm like, she's still going. Janice, let's get to the corner of the next block. And she's like, all right. So we get to the corner, and I'm like, one more time. I'm like, let's get to the park. And by the time we got to the park, it'd been almost another full mile. And I slowed down, started walking, and she just broke down, started getting very emotional, started tearing up, started crying. And I'm like, crap, I pushed her. I've hurt her. And I get emotional because I looked at her. I'm like, Janice, are you okay? And she said, why do I always do this? Why do I always give up when I know I've got more in the tank. She's like, I knew I could go further, but it was hard, so I wanted to stop. She's like, I've done that my whole life. I've given up on my family, my kids, my husband, my jobs, my everything. When I know I've got more in the tank, why do I do this? So here she's having this epiphany about all the hard stuff that she's thrown in the towel when she knows that she's had gas in the tank to get further. She's just never had anybody say, I'm doing this with you. We're going a little further. Those kind of things, I think you are spot on with understanding that you may be struggling at mile 18, but if you keep going, you're going to catch that second wind and you will finish if you've put in the work to get there. That kind of stuff I think is amazing. The Chicago Marathon's not easy. I mean, that's the beast.
It was.
Where was your hard part? You know, my hard part's usually mile 18 for some reason, because now it's a mental thing. So I know if I can get past mile 18, I'm golden. But tell me about that. Because of the things you've experienced, those hard parts that you've done in life, when you face those in a run, you're like, I've got this. This is hard, but not as hard as, you know, waking up and not knowing where I am or having the hangover. That's hard. That hurts. This doesn't hurt. I can do this. Tell me about your mindset with that.
Yeah, it was probably mile 20 is when I felt the pain. My hips were screaming at me. That's strength training. I need to work on that. But
hell yeah.
It was mile 20. I had just talked to my husband. He called me and I saw him on the course for the second time. I only got to see him twice. And so that helped me get through that mile 18, 19 point. And then mile 20, the pain started to hit me. I never hit a wall per se. Thankfully, I did a 3-day carb load, and that really worked for me. And my fueling was on point, hydration was on point, but the pain was there. And then I had just ran past, I saw they had the medical team out, and they had pushed all of us to the side, and there was a runner down on the ground that they were actively performing CPR on. And that, I mean, I was running and I started just sobbing immediately. And I had already cried several times before, just emotionally. But then that hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, they're down. Am I going to be capable of doing this? And then I'm thinking about them. Are they going to be okay? And then it just, all these emotions hit me at once. And I think that's when my mind started playing that game of like, well, your hips really hurt. Or, I mean, you could slow down a little bit, or it's okay if you walk, and that's totally fine. But I just remember telling myself, I was like, no, we showed up today to do this, and we have done the work. The training is there. We're going to cross that finish line, and we're going to do it. And I just remember I kept doing body checks over and over again. I'd be like, well, your feet hurt. Well, your feet have hurt worse before. You've walked home from the bars in heels at 2 a.m. Like, you can do this. And I would just go through points of my body, and I was like, okay, that hurts, but it's hurt worse before, or just slowly. And then that got my mind off of the total pain, and I was able to just lock in even more. And it was just a matter of, okay, we're almost there. And then I turned the corner, went up the mountain they always talk about at Chicago, and which it is a pretty steep hill at 26 miles.
Mean. Who was a race director of that? Yeah.
I know, like right at the very end, I was like, oh man. And then I crossed that finish line, and I just remember I was like, wait, I have to slow down. I just like, we all look like zombies after, because they just hand you that heat sheet blanket, and then you're just walking around and you're like, I don't know what to do now. Like,
I love it.
I've done the work, but now what? And that's when all the emotions really hit me. But yeah, that's when it got hard. But like I said, we've done harder things.
I love that. For all you new runners, all you new people in recovery, there's such wisdom in what you said that, you know, again, we've hurt worse. I remember early on when my athletes, I'm like, how in the world do you do these? We have the Rocky Mountains. I mean, right next door. They're right here. You can see them from my office. They're right there. So we run in the mountains a ton. And there's a big ultra run out here called the Squaw Peak 50. And it's a brutal run. And it's an ultra. It's rough. But I'm like, how do you seriously not power hike these mountains? You're running up these hills. And he said, Coach, it hurts. My legs are burning. They're on fire. And he goes, but it doesn't hurt as bad as it did the night I got arrested for domestic violence. And I was taken away from my family, and I was shoved into a jail cell. And the reverberations of the door when it slammed, what it felt like going through my body, he's like, that hurt, because I knew I had done stuff that I should never have done. So he's like, so when I'm hurting on these mountains, I remember what that feels like. And this is a cakewalk compared to that. I thought it's interesting how people in recovery, people that are on that healing journey, moving from addict to athlete, can channel their pain. They've felt worse. And so it gives them this bizarre kind of mindset that like, I can do this, which turns into success. I'm so glad that you shared that because I'm a believer in it. And so congratulations on that. And man, I thought your husband was awesome before. He's even better now. He's like running all over Chicago looking for you. And I think that's so awesome. Like,
he's going to love that you said that when he hears this, because all he could talk about the next day was how sore he was. He was like, I'm so sore. And I was like, you're sore?
You're like, I bet you are. Yeah, I love that. Because that's all that matters at the end, right? I mean, that was when we finish races and there's no one there, it's like, cool. But when there's someone there to cheer you on, I think we don't give our cheerleaders enough credit. Like, the people that stand by us through our recovery, your parents, your family, your sibling, whoever. Sometimes we don't give those cheerleaders enough credit because really we're doing it for the relationships that we built with them. Yeah, maybe we should expose him on this podcast too. Ask him his thoughts, huh?
Oh yeah, he loved it. Maybe next time.
I love it. I think it's cool. Well, share us a little bit before we wrap this thing up, your socials, because you are a very inspirational runner. You've got a great story and you put out amazing content. I love your stuff. Tell the listeners a little bit how to follow you, how to track what you're doing, and just support you in your efforts.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I primarily on Instagram at Helen Hansen-Smith. It's my full name and I am also on TikTok as well, also at Helen Hansen-Smith. But those are my primary avenues of just kind of sharing the crazy shenanigans and journey I've been on. And yeah, I appreciate any and all support and just hoping I can be somebody else's experience, strength, and joy, and be the person I wish I had when I was beginning my recovery.
Awesome. I know you will be because again, I've seen your stuff. And so we will attach these to the show notes. So listeners, go give her a follow. She's awesome. I think you'll find some fun attributes to recovery through recreation. And yeah, again, thank you so much for carving out a little bit of time with us and congratulations on 5 years and beyond. I think that's so amazing. Like that's such a cool feeling to have. Like keep it up. You've got lots more to do. Yeah, we do. The journey's not done yet. Nope, not even close. So athletes, you've been well fed. Please jump on, give her a follow. And again, jump on addictoathlete.org. You'll find this podcast amongst our others that are on there. We have a catalog of almost 500 now for you to choose from. So we've got lots of great stories here. And Helen's going to be no different. Jump on here and share this with anyone who's new in recovery. Maybe if you've got a gal in your family that I need a little inspiration, share this with her because she's going to inspire lots of folks. So keep up the good work out there. And until next time, do your best to turn your mess into your message.